Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we're going to talk about Amazon, and we're going to talk about Critical Role, and Matthew Mercer and Marisha Ray, and $9 million. All right, let's talk about this. All right, so what just happened? There was a Dungeons & Dragons event that just happened, and it was a global announcement. This was carried. This was news that was carried internationally, right? And the news was that there was a data leak at Amazon. Now, Amazon's a huge company. A lot of large companies are having data leaks at this point, but it was reported that Amazon had a data leak. It was then reported that within the information in that data leak, it was exposed that Critical Role made $9 million on Twitch with their show, right? With their Dungeons & Dragons show, okay? All right. So, and a lot of people responded to this, okay? So first, so what I'm going to talk about today is specifically a response to that news from OGGM. He has his own channel, and he responded to this news, and he gave his opinion about Critical Role making $9 million on their Dungeons & Dragons game. A lot of people have different opinions about this, right? Now, actually, I'm not going to give my opinion about Critical Role making $9 million in this video. I want to stay focused on my topic, which is Dungeons & Dragons as therapy. Okay, I think this is a growing theme. This is a major growing theme. And this $9 million announcement, or this $9 million story is here. Now, first of all, to be responsible, I need to say, we don't know if Critical Role made $9 million on Dungeons & Dragons. All we know is that there was a story that happened, right? This is very problematic because people are reporting on data leaks, right? And increasingly, news doesn't even ask the question on whether they should be reporting information that comes out of data leaks, right? I'm not positive that's a great trend, right? It's very problematic. So I'm just going to take a moment to say nobody actually knows, in my opinion, that Critical Role made $9 million, right? So I'm just responding to OGGM's response to that news story. I'm not even claiming if it's true or false, right? And the reality is, another issue is, news, the state of news today is, it barely even matters if anything's true or false anymore, because news just has so much power. Whatever they say is often assumed to be true, right? So all that's true right now is that this was reported, right? But OGGM very much did a response to this video, and you'll see I put my I'm going to put the link to his video below just in case you want context. But I will tell you what he said. All right. But I also, I want to give him a chance to, so, I'm saying what I'm saying about what he said. So I want to give you a chance to fully see everything he said if you choose to do that. Okay. All right. So what did he say? OGGM said that he was disappointed by this news. He was very sad that he said that he was specifically disappointed that critters were giving their money to Matthew Mercer and Marisha Ray, and to the Critical Role voice actors who are the key elements of Critical Role, right? The Critical Role members, because they don't need that money, right? Now, first of all, I'm going to say right now, I'm going to respond to that. That's a big old pile of wrong right there. I kind of think they do, right? They're all Hollywood. They're all Hollywood people. I don't know. They're not Hollywood actors, because that's a own class in itself. They're voice actors, and I'm not sure that voice actors actually qualify as Hollywood actors, right? But so they live in the proximity of Hollywood, right? And both literally and figuratively, right? They literally live on the East Coast near Hollywood, I think, right? And actually, if any of this is wrong, please correct me. I'm just explaining what I understand, right? If you live near Hollywood, $9 million is chump change, man. I don't think you could buy a shed in Hollywood for $9 million right now, right? It's so that might seem like a lot of money to OGGM, but the reality is, if you are in the circle of Hollywood people, $9 million I'm not sure you could even pick up the check, half the time. That's not a lot of money if you are in the circles of Hollywood people. That really isn't, right? Matthew, because that's another issue is Matthew Mercer and Marisha Ray. It's complicated, right? For us, the D&D community, they're utter rock stars, right? But in the real world, they're voice actors, right? And that is like one step up above the craft service people, to the Hollywood elites, right? There's not a lot of respect extended to voice actors. That is starting to change, thank goodness. I'm a huge fan of Tara Strong, and I would really like her talent to be recognized, and quite a few others. But the reality is, being a voice actor in Hollywood, you ain't quite made it, right? And so the $9 million they have would, like that would even be a down payment on a decent house in Hollywood, right? So they're not making a ton of money. I just kind of wanted to say that, right? But then OGGM said the reason why he's sad is that the critters have a lot of people who have mental health. He said the critters have people, and I think he was kind of implicating that there were a significant number of people among the critters who have mental health issues. I don't think he's wrong about that. I do see quite a bit of talk on Twitter, and a lot of people who are critters will often say, hey, I have, I'm oppressed for this reason, or I'm marginalized, or, and often with being oppressed or being marginalized, mental health issues come with that. So I don't think he's 100% wrong there. And so what he said is, he's like, I'm really upset that people gave their money to Critical Role who don't need the money, because he wants them to, just, he doesn't want any of the Critical Role people to have a Lamborghini. They need to, it's important that all the Critical Role people just, drive Honda Odysseys, right? Like, no $9 million for you. I really don't get that whole thing. But, and he was saying that what they should have done is, rather than give their money to Critical Role, they should have went to a psychologist and gotten the help they needed for their mental health issues, right? Now, of course, I'm summarizing what he said. If you want to hear the exact words, link below, right? And so that's what he says, right? It's interesting. It's a very interesting discussion. I think he's 100% wrong. It's actually, you know what? I think he's 90% wrong. I think there's a little bit. I understand. Actually, I think it's brilliant that he brought up this subject, right? So here's the thing. I am of the very strong understanding that it doesn't. Okay, let's talk. Let's use words. All right. There's this idea out there. Dungeons and Dragons shouldn't be used for therapy. We ain't talking about that. Right? We ain't talking about that, right? That's not what I'm talking about today. That is an entirely different discussion on whether Dungeons and Dragons should be used for therapy or not, right? And I have discussed that previously, and I think I may discuss that in more depth in the future. But what we're talking about right now is Dungeons and Dragons, without a doubt, is being used for therapy. Like, just go on Twitter, and people are like, "Oh, I had a bad week." And I've heard people make jokes on Twitter, and I've heard it in real life. Like, I had a friend who was like, I can't afford $200 an hour, but I can afford, hacking a goblin apart on Friday night, and that brings me a lot of joy, right? Like, wow, and here's the thing: D&D is being used for therapy. The discussion of whether it should be or not is over. It's already happening, right? And the only question now is how broad it's going to be, right? Now, here's the problem with what OGGM... I think OGGM is wrong, right? Here's why. So let's say that a typical critter, right? Let's talk about his case study. He's saying that there are critters with mental health issues. 100%. I think that's undeniable. You will hear it openly discussed on Twitter, by the dozens at least. Right? Granted, all right? Then let's say that the typical critter who falls into that category, who should have, according to the OGGM, gone to a psychologist with that money, right, gave $100, right? They gave $100 maybe over 3 or 4 years, right? Through Patreon or whatever, right? Or actually through Twitch. Like, actually, I think there's like super chats and things like that. So I think that, or similar, mechanics, right? So let's say through Twitch, to gain more access to the Critical Role people, they gave $100, right? So is OGGM right that they should have went to a psychologist and given that psychologist $100, or they could have given it, or they should have given it to Matthew Mercer, right? From the perspective of mental health, well, let's do the math, right? And let's look at this from a logical perspective, okay? Now, I got 4 kids, love all my children, and one of the parts of having a child is sometimes they need braces. And some of my kids have gotten braces. And I'll tell you right now, if you need braces, $100 ain't going to do anything for you, right? You have a systemic problem that is going to need to be addressed over months or years. Same with mental health, right? You can't go to a psychologist and say, here's my $100, help me. It ain't gonna help. That's not how psychologists work, right? They're not gonna be like, yeah, here you go, here's $100 worth of psychology and now you're better, or you're even a little better. They won't even, most psychologists to my knowledge, and please correct me if I'm wrong, they won't even entertain it. The psychologists don't want $100. They want a promise of $200 an hour for the next 18 to 36 months minimum, right? And that's how psychology works, right? So the reality is, if the critters gave $100 over 3-4 years to Matthew Mercer and Mercer Ray, right? First of all, are they getting therapy? Well, let's talk about it. I very much think they are, and here's why. Who goes to a therapist, right? Well, one thing is, I know a few people have gone to a psychologist, right? I'm going to use those terms interchangeably here. And again, please jump in below if you have more, correct information, or if you have, if you can bring any kind of additional knowledge to the discussion, right? All right. So you got a psychologist, right? So who goes to a psychologist? Well, I've known quite a few people who've gone to psychologists in my life. You know what they all had in common? They weren't doing great. They were not happy, right? I've never met a happy person who said, I need to go to a psychologist. Not once. I've never met it, right? It just doesn't happen. People go to psychologists, in my humble opinion, to seek joy and happiness and to find a path in their own behaviors to achieve joy or happiness, right? So we've already established psychologists ain't going to give you any joy or are not in the business nor have any interest of giving you happiness for $100, right? Okay. So, but guess what? Matthew Mercer is in that business, right? Now, Matthew Mercer didn't say, oh, I'm going to create Critical Role to bring joy to people. I think he was just he was just generally interested in Dungeons and Dragons. It's somewhat of a side effect. The joy that Critical Role produces is a side effect. It's an overflow of the joy Matthew Mercer has of putting on a great Dungeons and Dragons game. Okay? So, if a Critical Role person gave $100 to Matthew Mercer, they're doing 2 things, right? They're saying, hey, you brought me joy in the past, right? And I think you're going to bring me joy in the future. How's that any different than a psychologist, right? Doesn't it make a lot more sense that they gave their money to Matthew Mercer, right? They're acknowledging the work he's already done that a psychologist would have no interest in doing because of the money on the table, right? And here Matthew Mercer is like, yeah, I'm going to keep running this game, and if that produces joy for people, so be it, right? I don't think Matthew Mercer is in any way considering himself a psychologist, but strangely, he's absolutely functioning like it, right? He's producing the same outcome. He's producing the outcome that people go to psychologists for. So I think OGGM is outrageously wrong. It was incredibly wise for people who had mental health issues, in my opinion, to give money to Critical Role because it produced joy in their lives. They were acknowledging that with their U.S. dollars, right? And I would say U.S. Nobody said they made 9 million, pounds. They made U.S. dollars, right? 9. That's what the report was, right? So they paid them with their U.S. dollars and they got U.S. joy, right? That's the way it worked. So I really think I'm beyond the discussion of whether Dungeons and Dragons should be used as psychology, because I think that discussion is over. It's already done. If you want to stand on a hill and say Dungeons and Dragons shouldn't be used for psychology, that's great. Thousands of people are already doing it. Can we move the discussion to what are the ramifications of that, right? And what are the parameters of that? How do we make that better, right? And I'll tell you right now, it's not making psychology better, right? Because the reality is psychology generally is for the wealthy. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong there, but like I've, in my own life, I've seen that very, very clearly, that often people who, I do not know a ton of people who do not have money who are getting psychological help, right? And I know there's a little bit of pro bono, but it's not much, right? So all that is my opinion. What do you think is right? Do you think it's right that OGGM is right? That these critters could have taken their $100 or whatever small amount that they gave and gone and gotten any real help from a psychologist, right? If you think, please let me know in the comments below. And then also, now that we're in a world where people clearly are using Dungeons and Dragons for psychology, how do we process that, right? And also, if you think I'm wrong and people aren't using Dungeons and Dragons for psychology and then I haven't made that point, I'd love to hear that in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.